Hello, everybody. Meeting for Bricks. More. Back again. Pull up a chair. Let's talk. I have no idea if this is going to be a series. I'm just here throwing out some more things from my perspective, things that might be cool. I have no idea on how likely these are going to be real or implemented, but I wanted to bring a couple things in here. Lego original themes, IPs, whatever you want to call them, the in-house properties that Lego produces, the independent properties that Lego produces from their own sphere, without any outside licenses, without the use of ideas, or vaguely with the use of ideas, I should now say, especially after April 1st, and just making their own products. Something that benefits them the most, but maybe the toughest to market. But with so much history behind Lego and how people grew up with many of these things, these original things from Lego, you didn't need Lego Indiana Jones. You could have adventurers. You didn't need Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates was well enough, it was suited enough. So Lego themes have been shifting direction for the past decade, almost 2 decades now. Maybe even a little bit more than 2 decades. If you count, like maybe mid-90s, early thousands. Yeah, so about 2 decades. They've been shifting in direction with more properties that are in pop culture, that are representing things more accurately, that are more acquainted with people that may not know about Lego or may not be interested as much with Lego, but still like some building aspect of it. It's cool that you get to build your own DeLorean time machine or Ghostbusters headquarters or Star Wars Millennium Falcon in any number of scales. But there is a charm to Lego coming up with their own ideas and fostering their own creativity. Just having something that hasn't been introduced before or vaguely introduced in media before, but building it on with the Lego charm, a Lego personality to it. I'm talking about all those classic Lego themes that we know and love that we would consider either classic, vintage, nostalgic, things that Lego had to make themselves with their own brains, with their own teams, on their own terms. And I think that in some ways, there have been successors to it. There have been ways of re-releasing it that were appealing for a time. I don't know the likelihood of it happening again in the same way, but maybe something similar could happen. Maybe a revamp is possible. Lego plays with that nostalgia in a very unique way. The iconography of just the minifigure alone is pretty, prevalent. It's out there. It's available everywhere. The basic form of the minifigure, the nostalgia of the first minifigure ever made, first posable, I should say, the classic cop. Yeah, we had a big thing with that in 2018. Along with the 60th anniversary of the Lego brick, there was the anniversary of the minifigure, 40 years. A collectible minifigure series was created with one figure being a reprint of the classic cop, having his own 1x2 tile to emulate the Lego set he came with. It's really cool. It's always great when Lego references itself this way, but they play with it very carefully. Something like an anniversary, it makes sense. They would go all out. They would add a little bit more to it. They had a gift with purchase available during that time, which had these miniature builds of classic Lego sets from various themes. You had the first yellow Lego castle. You had the Futuron monorail. Or am I confusing it with another set? Hold on. I probably should have brought up the photo. 60 years of the brick. You had the Barracuda pirate set. Yeah. Okay. It wasn't the monorail. I am thinking of another set. I'm thinking of another product that Lego released. It was like a 50-year on track, I think, with celebrating, again, a milestone for Lego of creating Lego track systems, train systems. So the 60th anniversary of the brick, did have a monorail. I'm confusing it. It was the airport shuttle monorail. There was the Yellow Castle. There was the Barracuda pirate ship. And then there was one of what could be various space sets. I don't know which one exactly was supposed to be, but it has a recognizable style for those larger space sets. I think it's supposed to be the Galaxy Explorer. I think that's the main idea they were getting with that one, because there's a lot of little like engine detail here and there that some of the other ones didn't have. But the point still stands. When they celebrate an anniversary, they did a very good job with it. They have a good way of bringing some old fans into it, but also bringing new fans by the building techniques, by the pieces that are used, by the style of it being its own thing, being remarkable. Like, it's a piece of Lego history, and I'm glad they don't forget about it, especially for an anniversary. However, they do forget every so often about their past, and they make these little changes here and there, and they make these things that are not quite the same but referencing it. They might have a sticker or a print in a set, old castle stuff, like in Nexo Knights. There was a great one from one of the larger castle sets. They used 2 or 3 references to the Yellow Castle in there, just as an Easter egg. And they do this for a while, in and out, various themes. Sometimes collectible minifigures will have that. There's 19, right? I think it's 19, or is it 20? It might be no, it's 20. I'm getting it confused. The kid minifigure that has the what do you call them? The drone, the remote control drone, has a torso print with the monorail, the airport shuttle monorail logo on it. Even though several of us, including myself, thought that it was entirely supposed to represent Timmy, an earlier 90s minifigure that had a T on his shirt, had green sleeves, had also had a baseball cap. It felt right, but if it's not, it's not. It's fine. They had Johnny Thunder re-released in the Lego Movie 1 in the Space Police dropship, and they had him re-released again with more updates to his torso, face print, and everything. But still, you can tell it's him through the Series 19 collectible minifigures. They had classic Spacemen that were reprinted several times of the original colors in various packs, usually Bricktober packs. It would be promotional things. They had a green one in the exosuit. 2 of them green in the exosuit. They had one coming up in orange that will be in a new set, or not a new set. It's a book about minifigures. So, they still keep these things. They keep throwing them around. But notice a lot of these times, they're all promotional things. They're all very subtle. They're all very small things. We don't really see a return of the sets. We don't really see an upgrade of the sets. Or do we? I'm going to start things off back in the little old year of 2000. Or is it 2000? Nope, 2001. Almost at it. With a series called Lego Legends. This was a brief series during that year where they one-to-one, or almost one-to-one, I should say, re-released Lego sets from the past years with the same parts, with the same elements. I think the only differences were about the box art and the instruction manuals, just having the framing on them or saying Lego Legends on there in some way. Several Lego sets were released this way. And these weren't just available in stores and obsolete and then they brought them back. These are old sets going back to the 80s. So we had ones like The Guarded Inn and the Black Falcon's Fortress, both released in 1986. You had the USS Constellation, that's the earliest one from 1978. You had Main Street. I don't think those parts exist anymore, or at least some of the parts don't exist anymore, from 1980. You had a couple in here from the 90s, including, but not limited to, Breezeway Cafe, that was from 1990. You had the Black Seas Barracuda, I mentioned before, was a miniature, but also released in 1989. Blue Fury, 1995. You have Pizza to Go from 94. Um, the Railroad Club Car from 1993. This was part of the Metroliner, which is also another set, 1992. These sets, at the newest, were 6 years old. Actually, hold on. It might have even been older than that. Because I'm looking on one of the links down below for where all these Legends sets come from, and it actually lists out the Legends sets by item number, and then the original sets next to them to say what year they came out and those original set numbers. So I'm actually looking at this. The early ones that they produced: Guarded In, Metroliner, and Railroad Club Car, 2001. Pretty cool. Among those, the oldest was 15 years old. The Guarded in 1986. I did the math. Luckily, I did it correctly. The next ones, 2002. We have Pizza to Go, Breezeway Cafe, Black Falcon's Fortress, Black Sea's Barracuda. All in 2002. 4 of them released. I'm actually surprised. I thought this was only for 1 year. So addendum mid conversation. This is actually a couple of years, 2001 to 2004. It says. So those 4 sets came out in 2002. Among those, the oldest was about Black Falcon's Fortress, which at that time would have been 16 years old. Okay, that's still quite a while ago, but even the newest would have been from 1994, Pizza to Go, which at that time would have been 8 years old. So what I'm trying to get to with all of these, and you could read the rest of them on the link. What I'm trying to get to with all of these is that these were sets, they were obsolete, and some of them actually have remarkable parts that they were able to reproduce. I don't know because I don't have many of these sets in hand. I know I have Pizza to Go, but I don't remember if it was the original version. I don't have them in hand, but I can't confirm or deny if they changed a lot with the parts. It looked like they were the same from the pictures. And I feel like this wasn't it. I feel like they had another re-release of some sets. They definitely did release other ones in the form of Western, because I definitely remember my first copy of the Sheriff's Lockup. I have 2. I have the first copy of it was a re-release. I'm gonna look up right now and see how much later that re-release was. 2002. Okay. And yet it wasn't identified with the theme, even though the original one was released in 96. So that's actually a interesting note. I didn't know about that. I thought it was a legend set. Again, from what I can tell from that copy, and I did get the earlier copy at one point, they are exactly the same set, piece-wise. The same prints and the minifigs, the same everything. 6 years apart, though. Now, this is bringing up a good question, and that's, is that really going to work today? Would LEGO be able to take a set from the early 2000s and bring it back today? Would that program work? I don't think so. For one, LEGO sets were distributed for a longer period of time before being discontinued back in those 70s, 80s, 90s. They don't have the short shelf life that they do nowadays. And I'm no marketing major or genius or anything, but it kind of makes sense as to why they've shortened it nowadays, because they're always going to produce more product and they want to make that product worthwhile. So if people lay around on it and they know it's going to be on the shelves for a good amount of time, they probably won't buy it, or they won't buy it as soon. But if you have a shorter time span and it's like, okay, we're going to move on to other things, they'll have to buy it sooner. I don't know. That's just a guess. But that's what I've been understanding over time when I see these sets disappear off store shelves and then new ones get replaced. So that's interesting on its own. There was a time where LEGO said, hey, maybe we can release these because, they did live for a little while, but they're still a ways off from when they were re-released, and it could garner some new interest. It could be stuff that people missed out on, or just celebrating what was fondly, what was popular for a time. From what I can understand, these are all popular sets. Like, even nowadays, I'll get to more of this in the future. Pirates of Barracuda Bay, the Lego Ideas set, is roughly a translation of Black Sea's Barracuda. And that's something I'm really excited to talk about, as to how Lego can continue old Lego themes in some way. And I'm not saying that they can't make a new castle theme or a new space theme or anything like that. But it would be nice if they did, because they haven't really done as much as they used to. But even when they are making the old sets relevant, this I'm trying to explore the ways that can be done. So let's see. And surprisingly, they changed Hot Rod and Blue Fury, like the naming of one to the other. So next, I want to talk about two sets in particular. Let's actually bump it up to three. Lego Movie, Benny's Spaceship, which I can't say all at once. The Lego Ideas Pirates of Barracuda Bay, and this one's a little bit older, but the premise still stands. The Lego Knights Kingdom Royal Castle. And I have to emphasize it's the Knights Kingdom version because it was under the banner of Knights Kingdom when it was released, and it's referencing the old version of the Royal Castle. So these are all sets that have an upgrade, as I would like to call it. Like, it's not a re-release. It's fundamentally an older set or an older theme aesthetic that's recreated in a new way with new parts, new building techniques. Supposed to be a breath of fresh air while still being memorable, still being iconic. And while I don't own, I only own one out of three of these. I own Benny's Spaceship. And I have deemed that one my second favorite set of all time for many years. One of the things that holds true to me with that set is the potential of recreating classic space in a new generation. This is a good way of stepping into that for Lego itself and for Lego fans. Even if they didn't grow up with classic space, they still know it from various references and every so often minifigures that reference that through Lego sets, like I mentioned earlier. But this set alone gives the essence of classic space with the color scheme, with the shaping, with the general design of it. It still adds new play features to it that wouldn't have existed in that earlier time of classic space, like the wings folding out with more projectiles on it, panels that open up. Although you could argue the panels opening up and having extra things to take out of it is also kind of a thing they did back then. That is true. I just mean in a different way, because a lot of the earlier ones were like, here's a couple of doors, like panels that open up from the back of it, like a trunk on a car or a truck. But yeah, still fundamentally the same thing, opening it up and releasing more of it, so you have this expansion of the set. It's a big set. It's a really nice set for what it is. But that really opens the door for what else could be done. If there was a classic space revival, that basically would be the right way to go with it. That's a great example of how it could work. Benny's Space Squad kind of gives that feel. I didn't really put this one on the list, at least initially, because I didn't know if that was really if it really gave off the same vibe as that. It kind of does, especially with the buggy. That's the most building aspect thing of it, other than the robot. But And I guess you could say that it's a quote unquote battle pack. It has a thing that can be masked for more exploration. You could have all those as generic spaceman figures, no names attached to them, and it would work. The first picture I get brought up is the thumbnail for Brickstar's video. So he has all the faces changed. Anywho, I got the other one pulled up. And this one, okay, yeah, it kind of does. It does still use some newer pieces to it and newer building techniques. It is still very basic for the size of the set, but it's like, well, you get 10 mini you get 4 minifigures and 3 things to build for $10, and it's not too many pieces. It's like, what to say here? It doesn't say there. That's the international box. 68 pieces, including minifigs. Okay, but it's got the idea from the low end, the low budget end, how this could work. Given the various things Lego has built for space and city space in all these years, I'm sure they could find things in between for spaceships that would capture this style, for space stations, for operations of some kind, for mechs. Oh, a classic space mech with modern building techniques would be gorgeous. I mean, arguably, you could say the exosuit could be in that vein because it does carry a lot of the same color scheme, even though it doesn't have anything blue. It still has light bluish gray, dark bluish gray, a lot of greebling, posable arms and legs, and trans yellow. Okay, that's one way to look at it. I always considered it its own thing, that it wasn't necessarily trying to be a revival of classic space, but it could work that way. It does also add in things like different kind of parts or different uses of parts. It also has some metallic silver looking pieces here and there. Yeah, okay. I'll bite. It could. It could work like that. Pirates of Barracuda Bay is also a great example of that, where it has the box art style. First of all, that's one thing it definitely has over the Lego Movie Benny sets, is that the box art is gorgeous. Even if it's an idea set, it still reminisces the Pirates sets of yesteryear. So I'm just gonna open that one up right now. And again, this is mostly a listening thing, so all the links will be in the description down below if you wanted to see more about that. The background is beautiful. I do like the idea that this is, again, an expansion upon it. It is the pirate ship. It is an island. It has Islanders references in it. Like there's like a little tiki statue on the side of it, whatever the right word for it is. Um, they have updated versions of all the minifigures from the Barracuda set. I know there's a couple of reviews out there where they've obviously compared the Pirate Captain, which has been redone several times in Pirates series, but this one has even the pirate crew being an updated version of all their prints, of all the outfits, of their faces. It works. You have the ones with the printed mustaches now have an actual mustache piece, you know? That's pretty cool. I think that's pretty remarkable. And then you have the fact that you can make it into a shipwreck or keep it as a pirate ship. Both really good and great expansion upon what is already a cool thing with pirates and self. You had sets back in the day that were a complete ship or a shipwreck or an island or something else to explore. If it went beyond this, it could be having a soldier's fort, which in a way, kind of, the last time we had pirates in what, 2013? Was it pirate? Let me check. Lego Pirates, was it 2013? 2015? It was a little while ago, but it was still fairly recent. 2015. Okay. 2015 was sort of a reboot of classic pirates and still fits with other pirate themes from all those different years. So, yeah, that's kind of fair. It still captured the idea of, the half painted, soldier forts. You have different kinds of soldiers. Instead of them being red, they're blue. I think they did have earlier blue ones, but not not every set, not all the sets. Um, a good example of like an older pirate set that kind of captures this idea, or captures this, what do you call it? Like, I would say Pirates of Barracuda Bay is a combination of two sets while still being fresh and brand new. One of them I can't seem to find the name for, even though I found the picture. Hmm. Oh, here we go. So one of them is the Barracuda set that I mentioned earlier, which I didn't find the complete name here. And the second one is Rock Island Refuge. At least one of maybe two or three types of. Oh, here we go. Forbidden Island. That's the one I was thinking of. But both of them are similar shipwreck island builds, which is a unique concept. It is cool that they've done it more than once. Oh, Black Seas Barracuda. I had the name here all along. So it is a combination of those two sets and those two ideas of like models being one set, and bigger and impressive. What about the other one? Knights Kingdom Royal Castle. So Royal Knights was one of many castle factions back in the day. 6090 was the original one that I have here. I don't own it. I'm just saying that I have it pulled up. Originally from 1995. It was basically the start of the lion emblem as we know it. That are usually on shields and sometimes on torsos. So in 2005, almost 10 years later, 2005, 2006, somewhere around there, they recreated that set with a question mark. They made a newer version based off of that old one called the Royal Castle 10176. I've always had trouble with this being a recreation or an upgrade because while it does carry some similarities, especially like the blue roof on the top of the castle, you have some of the figures that resemble the older knights. You have the same sort of lion emblem. You have different towers. Honestly, this set reminds me a lot more of one of the Knights Kingdom 1 sets released in the early 2000s. I'm trying to see if I can pull up the name real quick, but unfortunately it's not showing up here in my Google searching. That's something I've always had as like working against it because it feels like it's that other castle from Knights Kingdom 1 instead. I've had a brick theory for a long time in stasis, trying to tie all three of those castles together, like they were taking place in the same land, or they were a revamp, in universe of one of those castles. But I will include the link for it in the description below to clarify it. So beyond that, it's good in concept of bringing back that royal castle, even if it's the other version, but adding more things to it. They changed around the pieces for figures. They added new armor for them. They have more pieces from that time period onward. New elements and things. It's a rough idea, but it still carries the same idea, the same kind of concept of revamping the set. So I think revamping is one of the best ways Lego can bring back older themes. Now, how often do they do it? I mentioned before that classic space would be awesome if they could have it in some sort of wave, in some sort of its own sub theme or something, to bring a whole bunch of Lego classic space sets revamped or with the same style or aesthetic, the same color scheme, but still improving on the original designs as its own thing. Handful of sets. I don't know if that's always going to work. I think one thing that makes it work a little bit better is if you had one of the following. You bring it back with a set every so often with representing one of these themes. Kind of like what they have now with Pirates of the Barracuda Bay. This is one set in a revamped style of pirates. And we won't have another one for a while after that. So that way it carries its weight. We have more time to design something else in that style. And, or, maybe they'll make a soldiers fort, revamp. But, carrying that same kind of idea from classic pirates. Same thing could happen with space. Same thing could happen with castle. Just have one set every so often, almost D2C level, I would say. And that should be satisfying for fans. That way, you don't have these weird gaps in between what is a space theme, what is a castle theme, what is a pirates theme, what is whatever. I can't really talk about town, because while it is part of the 3 original ones, town is continuing with city. You're really not going to have a revamp of town because city exists. Those are modern cars. Those are things you want to keep building that way. You're not going to build the older version of a car that often. So I'm leaving that out of it. That's why Pirates is entering the room. I'm also going to throw in there something more recent, which I feel like has almost been a reboot, but didn't quite reach that level. Before I get to that, though, I want to bring up LEGO Pirates Imperial Flagship, the LEGO VIP Classic Spaceman, Pirates, and Castle. These were 3 gift with purchase promos that were amazing for their time, being a small revamp of a classic minifigure and having a assembly with it that's reminiscent of a classic set or the aesthetic of it. The only one I don't have is Castle, but I do have Pirates and I do have Spaceman, so I can speak from experience. These were great. These were small, but really captured the essence, really captured the history that goes with those themes. Not just with how everything was revamped, but also having the box itself was a slide-out cardboard box, like a classic Lego set, where it has a little tray in it where all the pieces are and the instructions. That was good. You have the box itself decorated in a white background, very classic, very vintage Lego style. Some Lego sets had that prior to these. It wasn't really in the style of classic space. It wasn't really in the style of pirates, but it still gave you a vintage feel. It still let you know, hey, this is a piece of Lego history that we're making new for a limited time with a gift with purchase for you. What was also very special about those, and what honestly disappointed me with the 60th anniversary Walmart exclusives, was the fact that the inside of the instructions, you had decorations all over the place about pirate maps in the background and whatnot, and you had a timeline, a brief timeline of all of the Lego themes under those banners, under Classic Space, under Pirates, under Castle. In fact, it was not just Classic Space, but it was Modern Space as well. Every space theme that had come out had some representation. I think once or twice they even showed like a collectible minifigure or something like that. That was a really smart move. That was a really, this makes this a memorabilia piece. It becomes less of a set and more of like a time capsule. It's really cool that way. And that's why I was disappointed with the 60th anniversary sets. I thought they were going to go the same way with this. It's a very special item that you pay a certain amount in order to obtain it. It has a very nostalgic border for the box art, for the photography of the set itself. It uses very simple pieces. It has a couple things revamped. But the instructions were plain. They were fold-out polybag style instructions with just how to build the set. There was nothing nostalgic. There was nothing of explaining the history of Lego with it. The best case you had with that in that period was with the Bricks on the Go or Bricks on a Roll set. There was a 50th anniversary edition of the Lego Classic set where it had more packaging to it. around the sides of it, and for a limited time, for limited copies, you could mail away for a special book that gave you more instructions of things to build using parts from that set. You did still have to get some additional parts outside of it. I wanted to cover that on a video at one point, but I'm just going to say it here for now, if it hasn't already been said before. Then, inside of there, you also had a bit of Lego history. That was good. Why did that book have so much to it when all of these other sets, the windmill, the truck, I remember what the other one was. Oh, a house. The house. They didn't have that. They could have added that little bit more touch into those sets, and it would have been a much more memorable piece of celebrating Lego history. I said before that they went all out in the 60th and 40th. Almost went all out, in my opinion. I feel like that could have been improved. So something like that could happen as well, where Lego releases a gift with purchase every so often that is reminiscent and recreating a classic Lego theme. It could even be bringing a more modern Lego theme back in the fray, just to upgrade it. You know, it doesn't have to just be the classic space, castle, town, whatever. Even if they are the most iconic, you could still have something more contemporary to throw in the mix. That way, it still keeps that fresh. But I totally understand if it's going to be like 1 per year or 2 per year at best. With all the gift with purchases that go on 2 a month, 24 throughout the year or so, that's a lot. And you could easily squeeze 2 of them in there to be more nostalgic. I mean, they kind of already had that recently with the 40th anniversary set of Lego Train. Was it 40th or 50th? I don't remember. It was a very classic Lego Train that was a gift with purchase during, I think, March. And it looks gorgeous. And I've seen people compare it to the original model. They had a reprint of the figure as well. Even just reprinting a figure, like they did with the classic Cop or the Bricktober sets. They reprinted the classic Spaceman. They reprinted even more contemporary figures in a handful of vintage minifigure collections, which also will be linked in the description below. That was cool. That was a good idea. Again, if these are all promotional items, enough to drive nostalgia and also drive sales, go for it. That's not a bad idea. And make it as limited or as limited in time as possible, but still keeping it relevant enough that it's like, okay, we still have our things going on now, but we're still remembering the past and still have some cool things to throw your way. There were 2 Lego books with Barnes & Noble exclusives, great Lego sets, and absolutely everything you need to know about Lego. They both had a miniature of a classic space. I think it was, again, the Galaxy Explorer. That could work as well. You could have the gift with purchase being either a reprint of the figure, with a set, or a redesign, not redesign. That's what I said before. Or a miniature model of a classic Lego set. And again, you could even go contemporary with it at some point. Mix it in between things so it's not all just the 70s sets. You could have one of them in the 70s, one of them in the 90s. Next year, one of them in the 80s. One of them, you could recreate a classic wooden Lego set with plastic. How's that sound? And they have already done something like that, especially for Lego employees as special gifts and part of the Lego Ambassador program. There were a few cases of that over the years. One of them being, I don't remember which year exactly it was, but they had the wooden duck in a black and red color scheme. It had a pull string that you could build. It looks pretty cool. It's not the Lego duck that everyone thinks of when they go to, a Google search or looking through Lego history, but it's just enough. And again, if you had that packed properly with some vintage fonts, from the earlier time of Lego logos being used, that could work well as a gift with purchase. or even other wooden products, again, created in Lego form. You could also have, there was also an employee exclusive that had a bit of nostalgia to it from 2018. It wasn't entirely about it, but it still had a couple things in there. There were reprints of 3 minifigures. I believe a doctor, there was a civilian, I think. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but there were 3 minifigures that were each printed anew, and they were shared inside of these little boxes. And those boxes were on a large scale version of a minifigure of Santa with a reindeer and a sled. And I thought that was really cool. The only thing I would say would really improve it is if they had a sorry, I just had to do some relocating. The only thing that would have improved it, based on what I've seen, is if they made a little more, just a handful more pieces of the actual minifigure version of that. I have seen pictures where it shows a minifigure Santa, a minifigure sized reindeer, and the sled built out of a handful of pieces that the larger employee set was emulating. So I thought, yeah, that's still a cool idea. Not necessarily changing the scale of it. Again, that's kind of like what I said before with the micro scale, but having some kind of set with a little more than the reprints in there. Or maybe having like a display stand with them, kind of like the Women of NASA ideas set, for example. Something like that. Or you could have them thrown in with the collectible minifigures, one per box, like they did with the classic cop. I don't know. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is a reboot. And I kind of brought this up before, but I'm bringing up a new theme, genre of reboot. I mentioned in the beginning about adventurers. Like, oh, we don't need a license. Like Indiana Jones, back in the day, we had adventurers. They were traveling around the world, searching for treasure, had a lot of action. There were traps, there were, different ways of getting around objects. Okay. And I would say that there were 2 times where they almost rebooted it. The first one being Pharaoh's Quest in 2011. This looked good. It had some uniformity of, each of the vehicles representing one group looking for treasure. This one had an interesting spin on it where it wasn't about 2 groups finding treasure, one of them to, basically be grave robbers or just steal it for their own riches. Arguably the first group could have been. It never really said it belongs in a museum. The more architectural or archaeological way of going about it, like Johnny Thunder did. But the characters had the same naming convention as adventurers. You had Professor Hale, like you had Gale Storm. You had Johnny Thunder, like you have Jack Rains. They kept that same idea and almost Easter egg reference of adventurers alive. If you look at the character of Jack Rains, he looks a lot like an updated Johnny Thunder. Different facial hair, maybe a bit of different torso printing, but the same general outfit and time period idea. Those sets were designed with the time period in mind of the early 1900s, around 1920s, by having jeeps, half-tracks, planes, biplanes, like a more classic style of transportation, but still traveling around the world. My hope at that time, when that theme released, is that they wouldn't just stop at Pharaoh's Quest. If they were going to have something monumentally niche like this, something that special, because that concept doesn't come around that often, that they would go full force with it. They would have an Egyptian one, that they would have an Amazonian one, something jungle related, They could have a Himalayan one. They could have had an Orient one. They could have had a dino related one. If you want to tie in all the little dino themes in between, you maybe can. I wouldn't feel like they had the adventure archaeological side to it the way that Dino Island for adventurers did. And Orient Expedition was kind of like a slice of a bunch of areas, but still had enough in each one to make it remarkable. Imagine that nowadays, with so many Ninjago sets that represent that art style and that architecture of Chinese culture, that could do well. That would be great. Or you would simply take any of those sets or any of the Chinese New Year sets and just add a figure or two in there, exploring it. Maybe add some treasure hidden away in some cave, whatever the case may be. There is a fantasy element that could be added to those, or the idea of those sets, to bring it really back. And Atlantis almost has that, but from an underwater perspective. You have these supernatural beings that guard the treasure underwater that are based on sea life and have, unique markings. They have their own runes. They have specific warriors in minifigure form that, look like manta rays, that look like squids, that look like barracudas. They look like, or not barracudas, piranhas. They look like crabs. I'd almost consider that an adventurer's idea, like reality. And only somewhat happened in Adventurers, but definitely was furthered with diving themes like Atlantis or Aqua Raiders. Power Miners kind of works in that same way. Rock Raiders. Rock Raiders and Power Miners are a great idea for like how to sort of reboot the idea, the subgenre, while still being its own thing. That worked well. You had rock monsters. They were guarding these crystals and would give them extra power if they were to obtain them, disrupting the earth. You had a whole bunch of drilling teams. You had some for collecting. You had some for drilling. You had some for combat. You had bases, different operations. And it breaks the mold. Adventurers and Rock Raiders and these subsets, these other themes that carry those ideas along with it, are good for a once in a while thing. I definitely understand they wouldn't have that like every year or every few years. It would be much further than that. And I think now it might be a good time to bring it back. The only thing is, the last time they brought back something like that was in Lego City. And I've actually talked about this before on a long video. As a complaint, that older Lego themes can't thrive the way they used to. They get absorbed by concepts into Creator, City, Ninjago. People have already made the comparisons that Ninjago is adapting a lot of older ideas into their theme, such as pirates, such as arguably rock monsters, with the final battle sets, maybe. With upcoming castle, there's some castle elements. You have Lego City that adapts things such as adventurers with the jungle exploration. They have their own divers. Arctic was never really its own thing. It was always a part of town in some way, at least as a major theme. So I wouldn't count that one that much. Although that would be interesting if Arctic did have its own action adventure style to it. Like if that was an expansion of adventurers, that'd be remarkable. But yeah, they're absorbed into all these evergreen themes. And Creator, every once in a while has something pirate themed. I don't think they really carry the other elements as much, unless it's actually making the animals like in the underwater animals. They'll just create the animal itself
not necessarily minifigure scaled. They sometimes have submarines, pirate things. They have the pirate coaster. They have a pirate treehouse. That kind of works. So it is interesting that these concepts are still being used nowadays, even though it's very minuscule and it's very selective. And I totally get that they would be selective with it because they're trying to push new ideas forward, and they have a lot of resources put into other current licensed themes. If you focus all of your design aspects into those, you won't have to worry about creating something on your own and making it distinct enough from the past stuff, or to be appealing. Some have argued that you do have these older themes in different ways. You have Pirates of the Caribbean, you have Lord of the Rings, you have Indiana Jones. These are all carrying aspects from those earlier themes as a license. And because of those, Harry Potter as well, with the castle aesthetic, because of those, that's why you don't see any of those themes return. Space being killed off by space being killed off by Star Wars. I don't know how true that is, but I could definitely see if people take it that way, that they're like, hey, this kind of doesn't work. You already have spaceships, you already have these models, and granted, you're not really going to adapt anything from Star Wars into space. But after so many space themes that they've done over the years with these tiny factions all trying to be distinct from each other, I can see that it would get increasingly difficult to make something new or even reminiscing the older ones. But they still do, every once in a while. Lego Movie 2, you have the Sistar Starship that has its own color scheme. It has its own style for the spaceship itself. The way that all the pieces work together to make that the shape of it. Who knows? And again, I kind of like the idea that if any of these older themes, Western as well, with Lone Rangers, was kind of a Western revival, short-lived though. If any of these themes had a chance of being brought back and still in circulation and still reminiscent of older themes, but being just enough taste to see what new can be done with them, I'd say that's probably the best angle, is to make one set every so often. Pirates Imperial Flagship, I didn't really cover that before, but I meant to. That basically covers that idea. One large D2C set every so often to give you a taste for it without being an entire theme, without being a huge budget of parts and elements, but still having enough flavor to one set to make it worthwhile. Pirates of Barracuda Bay. It gives you two, almost three things in one. That's pretty good. And Pirates of the Imperial Flagship was actually at the time of 2009 Pirates, or like right around it. But it was distinct enough from the Pirates theme that I consider it its own thing. Even though it did have the same figures from it. It was still vastly different in style and scale, that it felt like it was going for its own UCS status as an IP. So that would be great if something like that happened. I'm not saying it will. I'm not saying this will push things forward to make it happen. I just wanted to share my thoughts out there as to how do we hope for the best? What's the best case scenario of trying to make these themes still relevant, still bringing back old stuff, but still bringing new stuff to the table? I mean, even right now, another one that kind of leans into that niche subgenre category is Monster Fighters, Scooby-Doo, and then Hidden Side. You have a monster element and spooky, haunted, something or other, supernatural thing going on, with a lot of things that could be basically standard or lean a little bit into everywhere, but with an added flair of, ghost activity. That's pretty neat that they're able to pull this off 3 times, including Scooby-Doo. Even if you have that as a license to work from, I'm still counting that in there. And I'm glad that Hidden Side is so far the biggest expansion of it. Monster Fighters lasted, I think, one wave, maybe a second wave. And the Haunted House, again, kind of like the Imperial Flagship, was a part of the theme, but still distinct enough to be its own thing. It's like its own D2C, I think. Hidden Side, it has almost 3 waves of sets. It's very expansive. It has a lot of potential. It's offering new ideas all the way. Not just the fact that, it has ghosts on it, but like you have a shrimp boat, you have a shrimp shack, you have a graveyard, you have a high school. You have all these concepts that have been scarcely made before in Lego, or never made before in Lego, or in the same idea, the same category, like a shrimp shack. Yeah, you've made a restaurant before, but have you made it serving at a seafood level? Maybe not. Have you made a shrimp boat that looks, more rounded, has like a simpler style to it? And that one also is like a miniature Pirates of Barracuda Bay. You get a 2 cent, 3 cent thing in one. You can split it up to be a shipwreck, or you can keep it assembled as the boat. You got the graveyard. Every once in a while, Lego makes a graveyard, usually for a license. This is one of the few times where they didn't. Monster Fighters was another one. So these are all really cool things, and I hope that Lego plans to sprinkle these in throughout the coming years, throughout the coming almost decades, I should say, of trying to reminisce the old sets and the iconic old sets and figures with something like gift with purchase material, but still making it worthwhile with it, having some, history behind it, or packaging that makes it more nostalgic, or both. It could be in miniature. It doesn't have to just be printed figures. It could just be a miniature build of an older set with newer techniques, just to make it look right. 60-year the brick. There you go. And then you could have a D2C set. Maybe not every year, not with every theme, but it could be like once a year. Like this year, we have a Pirates one. Next year, it could be a Western one. I don't know. Something like that would be kind of cool. And then just, yeah, if you could have it spread out enough that it'll carry for a while of a design and for that taste in a certain area. But then you could also have it, a little bit on the constant side that you feel like it's treating everything. It's not just one thing or nothing. That everything gets a little bit of treatment every so often to be brought back and upgraded. So thank you for watching this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you have any ideas of how this sort of stuff could work, let me know as well. You can, if you have any fan designs, I'd be happy to see them. I remember the 60th anniversary brick set competition was really, really good idea. A really good opportunity for miniature scale versions of iconic Lego sets. Things that people identified with, people enjoyed. I built one myself, 5956, in a miniature form, which will be its own video on the main channel. But even though that wasn't a set I grew up with, it represented the theme. It represented adventurers for me, which was the theme I fondly remember. And eventually did get the set for it. So I like ideas like that. I like community efforts like that as well. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later.